In 21 days, I was in Kailash. I could barely speak. I took one strand of what is there on that mountain. You won't believe. In 2.5 hours, I was almost 10 to 15 years younger than what I was at that moment.
For centuries, Mount Kailash has stood in absolute silence, untouched, unclimbed, and wrapped in reverence. Rising from the Tibetan plateau like a perfectly carved monument, it has long been called the spiritual axis of the world. Pilgrims walk around it in devotion, believing that even a single circuit can cleanse a lifetime of karma. No one climbs it. No one dares disturb it. The mountain has always seemed less like a formation of rock and more like something placed there with intention. And now, after thousands of years of mystery, a group of reclusive Chinese monks claim they have discovered what lies inside. What they describe is beyond belief. The story began quietly. A remote monastery resting miles from any modern settlement reported unusual tremors beneath their meditation halls. At first, the vibrations were dismissed as minor seismic activity, common in that region of the Himalayas. But these tremors were rhythmic, deliberate, almost mechanical. The monks, who had spent decades in silence and contemplation, felt something shift not only beneath the ground, but within their understanding of the sacred mountain itself. Mount Kailash has always been different. Unlike Everest or K2, it has never been conquered, not because it is impossible to climb, but because it is forbidden. It is sacred to Buddhists, Hindus, Jains, and followers of Bon. Each tradition calls it the center of the universe in its own way. Yet beyond the spiritual stories, there have always been whispers, satellite images that appear too symmetrical, faces and geometric patterns visible in the ice, magnetic anomalies that scramble compasses, pilgrims reporting time distortions, claiming that hair and nails seem to grow faster during their journey around the base. The monks did not seek to uncover a secret, they were forced into it. After a particularly strong tremor shook the western ridge, a section of rock collapsed near a remote path used only during summer pilgrimages. When the dust settled, something impossible was visible beneath the stone. Not natural rock, not ice. A smooth, dark surface reflecting sunlight like polished metal. The monks approached cautiously. The surface was cold, colder than the surrounding snow, and etched with markings unlike any script they recognized. These were not Tibetan characters, nor ancient Sanskrit, nor Chinese calligraphy. The symbols spiraled inward, forming patterns that seemed to shift when stared at too long. It felt less like writing and more like circuitry. For days, they debated what to do. To interfere with the mountain felt sacrilegious, but to ignore such a revelation felt equally wrong. Finally, guided by their abbot, they decided to investigate further, believing that truth, no matter how shocking, could not oppose genuine faith. Behind the exposed surface, a narrow opening descended into darkness. It was not jagged like a cave. It was precise, angled perfectly downward, as if cut by an impossibly sharp instrument. The monks lit butter lamps and stepped inside. What they found defied everything they thought they knew about history. The passageway extended deep into the mountain, its walls smooth and seamless. There were no tool marks, no cracks. The air inside was dry and strangely warm. After walking for what felt like an hour, they emerged into a vast chamber illuminated by a faint ambient glow. The light had no visible source. It simply existed, radiating softly from the walls themselves. The chamber was circular, perfectly symmetrical. In its center stood a towering structure resembling both a pillar and a machine. It was made of a material that appeared metallic yet organic, pulsing faintly as if alive. Thin lines of light traveled along its surface in rhythmic patterns. The monks described the sensation in the room as overwhelming, as if the air carried a low hum that vibrated in their bones. Carved along the perimeter of the chamber were reliefs depicting scenes that looked eerily familiar, civilizations rising and falling, massive floods swallowing cities, strange beings descending from the sky. The figures were not stylized like traditional art. They were precise, almost documentary in detail. One panel showed the mountain itself being shaped by towering entities using beams of light. The monks documented everything they could with simple cameras brought from the monastery. Yet strangely, electronic devices began malfunctioning the deeper they went. Batteries drained rapidly, screens flickered, only mechanical instruments seemed unaffected. In a smaller adjoining chamber, they found what appeared to be a map, not of Tibet, not of Asia, but of the Earth as seen from space. Continents were depicted in configurations that did not match modern geography. Some landmasses appeared where there is now ocean, others were missing entirely. It was a map of a different era. The The most shocking discovery lay beneath the central pillar. After hours of examination, they realized the structure was not anchored to the floor. It hovered, suspended by a field invisible to the eye. When one monk extended his hand toward it, he felt resistance, like pushing against a magnetic barrier. As he touched the surface, the chamber reacted. The walls brightened, symbols began to glow. The pillar emitted a deep resonance that filled the space, and then images flooded their minds. Not hallucinations, shared visions. They saw ancient oceans boiling, massive structures rising from deserts, a civilization far older than anything recorded, harnessing forces of nature with effortless mastery. They saw Mount Kailash not as a mountain, but as a constructed monument, placed deliberately at a precise coordinate on Earth. When the visions ceased, the monks collapsed, overwhelmed. They returned to the monastery shaken, but resolute. For weeks, they meditated in silence, trying to reconcile what they had witnessed. Word of the tremors and landslide had already spread to local authorities. Soon, officials arrived, cordoning off the area under the guise of safety concerns. The monks faced a choice: remain silent and allow the site to disappear behind government secrecy, or speak openly and risk disbelief, ridicule, or worse. They chose to speak. In a recorded statement that quickly spread online before being removed, the abbot described the interior as a library of humanity's forgotten beginning. He insisted that Mount Kailash was not merely sacred symbolically, but functioned as a repository of knowledge, preserved through cataclysms that erased previous civilizations. Experts dismissed the claims as fantasy. Geologists argued that symmetrical formations can occur naturally. Officials denied any unusual findings, yet satellite imagery of the region suddenly became restricted. Access roads were blocked, pilgrimage routes were shortened. Meanwhile, independent researchers analyzing the few leaked photographs noted anomalies. The inscriptions did not match any known language. The material of the inner walls reflected light in unusual spectrums. Some physicists speculated that if the hovering pillar was authentic, it suggested manipulation of gravitational forces far beyond current human capability. The monks never claimed aliens built it. They never used sensational words. They simply stated that humanity's timeline may be incomplete. As weeks turned into months, subtle changes were reported near the mountain. Compasses spinning erratically, animals avoiding certain areas, pilgrims describing vivid dreams during their circumambulation, dreams of vast cities buried under ice. One monk returned secretly to the entrance before it was fully sealed. He reported that the ambient glow inside had intensified. The pillar's hum had grown louder. It was as if the structure had awakened. Some believe the mountain is a natural pyramid shaped by erosion. Others argue it is the remnant of a lost advanced civilization. A few whisper that it is something even stranger, a device designed not to be entered, but to activate at a specific moment in human development. What makes the story so powerful is not just what was found, but who found it. These were not treasure hunters or fame seekers. They were monks who had renounced worldly ambition. Their lives were devoted to silence and contemplation. To fabricate such a story would contradict everything they stand for. The world remains divided. Skeptics demand physical proof. Believers see confirmation of ancient myths describing gods descending upon a sacred peak. Governments maintain their denials. Yet the idea has taken root. If Mount Kailash truly contains a structure older than recorded history, it would force humanity to confront uncomfortable possibilities. That our civilization is not the first. That knowledge can be lost and rediscovered. That myths may carry fragments of historical truth. Perhaps the most unsettling implication is this. If something was built inside the mountain, who built it and why? Was it meant as a sanctuary, a warning, a beacon? The monks have returned to silence. Their monastery gates are closed to journalists. The exposed entrance has reportedly been sealed with reinforced barriers, but no barrier can contain an idea once it is spread. Pilgrims continue to circle the mountain, their footsteps tracing the same ancient path. They chant mantras, spin prayer wheels, and bow in devotion. Yet now, as they look up at the symmetrical peak cutting into the sky, they wonder what lies beneath the ice and stone. Some nights, locals claim a faint glow can be seen along the western ridge, pulsing softly against the darkness. Officials attribute it to atmospheric conditions, but those who have heard the monks' testimony see it differently. Mount Kailash still stands, unmoved and silent. But silence does not mean emptiness. Deep within its core, whether natural or constructed, something extraordinary may be waiting for humanity to remember what it once knew, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself fully. And if the monks are right, what lies inside that sacred mountain is not merely a hidden chamber or an ancient machine. It is a message across time, carved into the heart of the earth, reminding us that our story is far older, far stranger, and far more profound than we have ever dared to imagine. The message, if that is what it truly is, does not announce itself with thunder or spectacle. It lingers like an echo in the minds of those who have heard the account. In the months after the monk's testimony vanished from major platforms, fragments continued to resurface in unexpected places. A translated transcript appeared on an obscure academic forum. A blurred photograph circulated among independent researchers, showing the edge of the dark interior wall with its spiraling glyphs. Each time the material was uploaded, it was quickly flagged or removed, yet not before being copied and shared again. What made the situation more unsettling was not simply the claim of a hidden chamber, but the precision of the monks' descriptions. They spoke of angles measured not by guesswork, but by careful pacing and alignment with the sun's position at the entrance. They described the chamber's curvature as mathematically perfect, consistent at every point, something rarely found in natural formations. One monk even noted that when chanting a particular low-frequency mantra inside the central hall, the sound did not echo. It was absorbed, as if the walls were designed to neutralize vibration. A retired engineer from Beijing, who had once worked on underground infrastructure projects, publicly stated that if the descriptions were accurate, the internal corridor could not have been formed by erosion or simple geological fracture. The smoothness alone implied advanced shaping techniques. His comments were cautious, technical, and devoid of mysticism. Yet within days, his post was removed and his profile deactivated. Meanwhile, pilgrims arriving at the mountain reported increased military presence at certain access points. Official explanations cited preservation efforts and environmental protection. Still, the western ridge, where the landslide had exposed the dark surface, remained inaccessible. Satellite images of that specific sector became lower in resolution than surrounding areas, a subtle change that only the most attentive observers noticed. Inside the monastery, life continued as it always had. Dawn prayers, silent meals, hours of meditation. But something had shifted. Those who had entered the mountain carried a quiet intensity. According to a visiting scholar who had briefly spoken with one of the younger monks, they no longer viewed the discovery as an intrusion into the sacred, but as confirmation that the sacred had always been more literal than symbolic. The mountain was not simply revered because of myth. It was revered because, somewhere in humanity's distant memory, knowledge of its true nature had once existed. One evening, during a rare conversation permitted with a small group of trusted elders, the abbot elaborated further on the shared vision triggered by contact with the hovering pillar. He described seeing cycles, vast stretches of time where civilizations flourished with astonishing capability, only to vanish beneath ice, flood, or fire. He saw structures similar to the one within Kailash positioned at other coordinates across the planet, acting as nodes in a global network. Some were dormant, some were destroyed. Kailash, however, remained intact. He insisted the vision did not feel imposed or manipulative. It felt archival, as if the pillars stored a record rather than broadcasting propaganda. The imagery contained no language, no instruction, only scenes. The interpretation, he said, was left to the observer. This detail intrigued researchers who studied ancient myths. Many traditions speak of previous worlds destroyed and reborn. In Hindu cosmology, time unfolds in repeating ages. In certain Buddhist texts, entire universes arise and dissolve like breaths. Even distant cultures across oceans carry flood legends with striking similarities. The monk's account seemed less like a contradiction of faith and more like a technological reflection of it. Speculation intensified when a seismology institute in the region recorded unusual low-frequency vibrations centered near the mountain. The data, publicly available for a brief period, showed rhythmic pulses distinct from typical tectonic movement. While officials attributed them to glacial shifts, independent analysts argued the consistency of the pattern suggested something else. Then came the blackout. For 6 hours one night, communications across several nearby settlements experienced disruptions. Internet access slowed to near zero. Satellite phones dropped calls. When service returned, no official explanation was provided beyond technical maintenance. Yet during that window, multiple witnesses claimed to have seen a faint vertical beam of light rising from the western side of the mountain, thin and pale against the night sky. Photographs surfaced, grainy and distant, impossible to verify conclusively. Skeptics dismissed them as lens flare or drone activity. Believers pointed out the alignment of the beam with the exact location described by the monks. The debate raged online, fractured along familiar lines of doubt and conviction. Back at the monastery, the monks who had entered the chamber reported vivid dreams growing more frequent. Not chaotic or frightening, but instructional. They described geometric forms unfolding in precise sequences, like complex equations visualized in light. One monk began sketching these forms upon waking, filling page after page with intricate diagrams. A mathematician who later examined the sketches remarked that certain patterns resembled advanced topological structures rarely encountered outside high-level theoretical research. The most controversial claim emerged quietly. According to the abbot, during a subsequent meditation focused on the memory of the chamber, he perceived a sensation of anticipation emanating from the pillar, not consciousness in the human sense, but readiness, as though the structure was designed to respond when certain conditions were met. What conditions remained unknown. Some theorized that the mountain's interior device could be ancient energy storage, waiting for planetary alignment. Others proposed it functioned as a data vault, preserving knowledge through cataclysm so that survivors of each cycle might rediscover it. A smaller, more radical group suggested it was a stabilizing mechanism, regulating subtle forces within Earth itself. The idea that Mount Kailash might be more than symbolic, unsettled institutions far beyond the region. If validated, it would disrupt established historical timelines, challenge archaeological consensus, and blur the boundary between myth and engineering. It would raise questions about the origin of certain unexplained megalithic sites scattered across the globe. It would imply coordination across continents in a period long assumed primitive. Yet no official excavation was announced. No scientific team publicly confirmed entry into the chamber. The silence from authorities remained firm and uniform. And still, the mountain endured. Winter descended upon the plateau, covering the western ridge in heavy snow. Access became nearly impossible. For a time, public attention drifted toward other crises, other headlines. But among those who had studied the fragments of testimony, the question lingered like an unfinished sentence. What if the discovery was not an accident? What if the landslide was triggered intentionally, revealing the entrance at precisely this moment in history? The monk's earliest account mentioned that the tremors preceding the collapse felt rhythmic, not violent, not chaotic, but measured. If the interior structure had indeed awakened, perhaps the exposure was not a failure of concealment, but a deliberate unveiling. Spring approached again. Pilgrims returned in growing numbers. Among them were scientists traveling incognito, carrying compact instruments disguised as prayer tools. They circled the mountain respectfully, collecting data on magnetic flux and background radiation. Several recorded subtle fluctuations near the sealed sector, minute yet consistent. One evening at dusk, as prayer flags fluttered in the wind, a group of pilgrims paused along the northern face. The snow reflected the fading sun in a way that accentuated the mountain's geometry. For a brief moment, the shadow lines aligned to form what appeared to be a precise triangular symmetry extending from peak to base. It lasted only minutes before the light shifted. Photographs captured the phenomenon, igniting fresh waves of speculation about intentional design. The monks remained outwardly detached from the growing storm of interpretation. Their focus, they stated simply, was compassion and clarity. Yet in private, they continued their meditations on the vision of cycles. They spoke softly of responsibility. If the chamber was indeed a repository, perhaps humanity was nearing a threshold where the knowledge within it would become necessary again. And that possibility carries a deeper implication. If previous civilizations rose to extraordinary heights and still collapsed, then advancement alone does not guarantee survival. Technology without wisdom could repeat the same pattern. The mountain, silent for millennia, might serve not as a monument to power, but as a reminder of impermanence. Late one night, under a sky dense with stars, a young monk stood alone facing the western ridge. He later described sensing a vibration through the soles of his feet, subtle yet steady. He did not feel fear, only a profound awareness that humanity stands at a crossroads far larger than politics or borders. Mount Kailash does not offer easy answers. It does not declare its purpose in words. It simply exists, towering above the plateau with a presence that commands reverence. Whether the interior chamber proves to be geological anomaly, ancient archive, or something entirely unforeseen, the revelation has already altered perception. It has reopened questions long dismissed. It has bridged myth and inquiry in a way few events can. The mountain keeps its silence still. But silence, as the monks understand deeply, is not absence. It is potential. Within it lies the space where truth can emerge. If there is truly something hidden inside Mount Kailash, something constructed with knowledge beyond our recorded past, then perhaps the greatest discovery is not the chamber itself. It is the realization that history may be far more layered than we imagine. And somewhere beneath ice and stone, beneath centuries of devotion and doubt, the heart of that mystery continues to hum, patient and waiting.